Marty Camulo. Unfortunately, modern readers and researchers, the current technology is not programmed to satisfactorily map out ancient languages and help us identify citations. This is not a flex, but rather an example to illustrate how important it is to be able to read the different languages in their own alphabets. Bryant made one typo, which in this example, if you don't chase down the actual work he cited, will return no results other than his text, making the reader or researcher less likely to depend on his work. One of my strengths is that I am not a casual researcher, and my audience knows they can depend on my findings and conclusions being in the historical record. Bryant accidentally recorded Kappa-Megakaimuatinu Kokomen as Kappa-Omicron-Ka-Meganuatinu Kakinen in his research, which then led him to make somewhat erroneous etymological claims. Annalee. ANC myth, page 103. It is remarkable that Syncellus, speaking of Venifer's king of Egypt, says that he built the pyramids of Koshon, Sicellus, page 55, which before him had taken notice of the same history. The problem with this is I cannot return search results even if I use his mistaken Greek, nor can I return results by typing in the transliteration of it in Latin letters. I was only able to notice this because I've done the work and can read Greek. These little subtleties are what make people like me irreplaceable, and what I hope to impart that ethic on you, so that you become irreplaceable in whatever region you're in. He continued, IB, pages 103-4. Now Kochon, analogous to the Bethel, Bethshan, Beth Dagon, signifies the temple of the deity, the house of the great king, or ruler, for such is the purport of Khan and Kona. Even though this is an error, he may still be correct in his general assessment. It's not a big deal to me, but what is interesting is that he claimed Hercules was the chief deity of Tyre, the so-called capital of Phoenicia. This would demonstrate that the archetype was not of Greek origin. If my conclusions are correct that the Phoenicians are the Vetulonian navigators, or some other Etruscan offshoot, then it'd support the archetype of Hercules originating from the Etruscan Hercule, which would further support the subsequent origin of Ogmius from this Etrusco-Phoenician system, which I suspect is merely Etruscan. Bryant wrote, IB, page 104. Hercules, the chief deity of Tyre, and who was also highly reverenced in Egypt, was styled Khan. This would be a philological link to Cunobelinus, Lord Cuno, Cunobal, whose name is abbreviated CVNO on ancient coins found in Britain. On the reverse, we see an Etruscan sphinx with the word Tascio written on it, or it could be a mistake and it was supposed to read TVSCIO. This is a big difference. The subject does not seem to be conclusive. The explanations for the meaning of Tascio, which may be Tuscio, are also speculative, as seen in errors respecting the coinage of the ancient Celtic kings of Britain. It's important to remember that words can change meaning over time depending on context. For example, we hear the word virtuoso now and think highly skilled or gifted artists, but this word originally signified one who showed courage and virtue on the battlefield. Perhaps Tascio once meant something bold, ascribed to explorers who conquered hostile lands, which required a degree of barbarity. Food for thought. Since it is not conclusive, and I am not satisfied with the claim of it signifying Tasciovani, I'd like to add my speculation. There are various Latin spellings of Etruscan. They called them Tussi, Tuscans, but also Hetrussi, Etruscans. If that word was meant to be Tuscio on the back of the British coin, then it'd signify Cunobelinus the Etruscan. However, the Sicilian word Tascio signifies a brute or uncouth person, which would make the coin mockery. Cunobelinus the barbarian, or literally Cunobelinus the boorish villain. But it is important to remember that the Etruscans were called Tersinian pirates by the Greeks, signifying tower-building mariners, since the high seas consisted of piracy in some form for as far back as we can see. The Etruscans were known for building towers and sun pillars everywhere they civilized. So this could be an epithet encompassing everything involved with the business of navigating, signifying Cunobelinus the mariner. There are so many details, but I don't want you to get confused. Revisit the Etruscan sphinx on the coin, then continue scrolling to compare it to these Etruscan sphinxes. This radical Khan, suggested by Bryant, even occurs in the Dutch word for royal, which is Koninklijk, which I just happened to notice at the following site. The reason the Sicilian word Tascio may solve the mystery is because the ancient British languages are descended from Punic, Sicilian Phoenician. I demonstrate this in the real Universal Empire. Learned men demonstrated that the Celtic, Roman, and Sanskrit descend from the same source. Latin is observably descended from Etruscan and the ancient Italian languages, which were native and have no affinity to the Oriental languages, which is why they can't be translated. The Celts cannot separate themselves from the Latins, but their language still contains vestiges of their Etruscan ancestors, which are pre-Roman words. The oldest inscription in India is only from the 3rd century BC. Thus, it follows logically that Etruscan is the parent of these languages, and thus Italy is the origin of this universal system. To learn this system, invest in the Spirit World series. Bryant continued, AIB. Bi ekaton tessera. Toniraklin physikatatin Egyption dialecton kona legeste. Hercules, the one and only god Physi, was called Kona in the Egyptian dialect. Etymologica magnum. Roaphicap lambdata, Heracles. From hence we find that it was a sacred Egyptian title. According to some readings, the place is expressed Kokum, which is of the same purport. Bryant redeems his error by acknowledging Kokum, as Kapermegakaimuate nu Kokomen, is how it was written in the copies of Cycellus. But to be fair, perhaps it was not a mistake by Bryant, but the way it was written in the edition he had access to. Kochom, the same as Kaukum, signifies the house of Kam, or the sun, and seems to betray the purpose for which the chief pyramid was erected, for it was undoubtedly nothing else but a monument to the deity whose name it bore. According to Herodotus, the Great Pyramid was built by Cheops, Khammakansai, whom others called Chops. Khammakansai is essentially chaos, an ancient name for Janus. If this is not anecdotal, then I suspect the Great Pyramid was a temple of Janus, built by Etrusco-Romans. Cheops is now referred to as Khufu. Revisit these articles. Become a member to access the rest of this article.